Hello, you're watching TelecomTV Spotlight on 5G series. Time now for our strategy outlook discussion on 5G Edge and private networks. I'm Guy Daniels, Director of Content for TelecomTV. And based on our editorial coverage of the sector, we've identified the key areas generating the most interest and that could impact the strategic choices of telcos and their partners. For example, is vRAN driving telco edge deployments? Do telcos need to build their own edge infrastructure? And what enterprise apps are driving telco edge usage? Well, let's find out what our guests think. And joining us on the programme today are Arnaud Vamparys, who's Senior Vice President, Radio Networks and 5G Champion at Orange. Aaron Partouche, Global Vertical Principal Director at Colt Technology Services. Martin Taylor, Office of the CTO, Azure for Operators at Microsoft. And Richard Band, Head of Mobile Core and 5G, the Communications Technology Group at Hewlett Packard Enterprise. Hello everyone, good to see you all. Thanks so much for taking part in our discussion today. Let me start by looking at the RAN use case. Is the growing demand for vRAN driving telco edge deployments? Arnaud, let me start our discussion by putting that to you first.
Thanks. Indeed, we are operating in 27 countries in Europe and Africa. And today, the momentum we have on the edge deployment, it's more on our business customer sites. For network perspective, of course, we are preparing the introduction of 5GSA with a cloud native platform. And we are still working and testing Cloud RAN. And we have two main challenges to make sure we are able to introduce it, for example, in Europe. The first one is quite obvious. When we introduce it, we have to be the same level or better in terms of quality of experience. And there, it means we need really to have a specific hardware acceleration technologies. We have to be good at the cell edge as well. So you have to rewrite quite a part of the software, especially the distributed unit part. So the journey is on. We are testing with many technological providers some solutions, but we are not there. The second challenge is perhaps a bit more specific to Europe, where we have still to get the right fiber technologies to centralize the BBU part, that where the signal is transformed and used. And there, of course, it's a long journey. There we have quite an advantage because we are number one fiber player in Europe. So these two challenges, technology challenge and topology challenge, are on our main roads to be able to use Cloud RAN as the next main technology.
Okay, thanks very much, Arnaud, for that. Aaron, do you have a view on this from what you're seeing at Colt? Are you seeing a demand for vRAN as driving telco edge cases?
Yes, I think that probably it's right. I mean, we are not yet there, but there is a growing demand for vRAN that is at the end driving telco edge deployments. At least we see an emergence of actors building micro data centers and looking to serve the commercialization of 5G, but also technologies like IoT, augmented reality, or gaming. At Colt, we invested in making our network infrastructure programmable, which means able to orchestrate bandwidth connectivity, but also virtual functionalities, so such as LT1 and firewall. So I guess the question is, what is the link with vRAN? One of the huge advantage of RAN virtualization is that they are cloud native. So can be integrated as a software independent of the hardware server. So it is fully aligned with the vision of the network of tomorrow, which will be a platform for downloading and subscribing to network functions and allowing the choice of several suppliers or services in real time, like a smartphone, and relying on distributed edge infrastructure. So the vision is there. We are not potentially there today because there are some challenges, as explained just before, but clearly it's driving some demands and new actors in the market for that.
Aaron, thank you very much for that. As you say, the vision is there, and it's kind of aligning with the way we want to see our networks evolve. Well, thank you for covering our first question on this strategic outlook discussion. We're going to move on now, though. I'm going to ask a related question, and it's about edge infrastructure and whether or not telcos still need to be building out their own edge infrastructure, for example, revamping their central offices. Martin, do you have a view on this one as to whether or not it should be the telcos who need to build out their own infrastructure at the edge?
Essentially, telcos have a choice of building out their own or relying on third parties to build something out for them that they can host these network functions in. In general, I would say the hyperscalers are not geographically distributed enough, not close enough to the edge at the moment in most cases to support at least some of the network functions that telcos need to deploy at the edge. So, we've just talked about vRAN. That's certainly one function that has to be very close to customer populations. But also, other pieces of the mobile packet core, like the user plane function, and in some cases, the access management function, session management function, they need to be quite widely distributed. In general, at least the hyperscalers don't have facilities close enough to the edge for those functions. Now, there are some third parties who are out there, but I'm not seeing the telcos rely on them. And typically, we're seeing the telcos modernizing their COs, building out edge clouds. You may be aware, Microsoft acquired AT&T's edge cloud technology, and we're now rolling out those edge clouds for AT&T. So that is the pattern we're seeing for those network functions that need to be relatively close to subscriber populations.
Thank you, Martin. Arnaud, as the operator, the mobile operator on our panel, do you see a need to still maintain control and maintain the choices that you as a telco should build out your own edge infrastructure?
Today, in each of our operations, you have quite many points of presence. Why? Because we are operating fixed network, fiber networks, and mobile networks. So it's the sum of this location where we can put different equipment. And what we need is to transform our networks today more for the core network, to distribute some core network function, and tomorrow more on the access side. We have this question to host as well some application from third parties on our network. I think that the model is still on progress. And what I should mention is that for Europe, you have a regulation there where you can differentiate your quality of services if the service is inside the network of the operator. So it's a model that we need to work on with different partners and to make sure that we can give the best experience for our mass market, retail and business customers.
Thanks, Arnaud. Anybody else want to cover off on edge infrastructure building? Yes, please, Aaron.
I think it's useful to have our own edge infrastructure, to cope with the demand for deploying virtual network functions, extending cloud services, or enabling a smart solution for vertical. But I don't think that a single carrier or even telcos can serve alone the various needs from end users. So I believe that the key challenge is to partner and to facilitate the access of the edge infrastructure from various stakeholders. In the same way that Colt facilitated the interconnection of network through APIs. So I think the end goal will be for us to consolidate and giving access to our own edge infrastructure, but also third-party edge infrastructure to give a much more powerful experience to the end users.
Thank you very much, Aaron, for that. Moving on now to private networks, where we are seeing so much interest at the moment. I'd like to ask what we think is the best edge platform option for purpose-built private 5G networks. And Richard, let's start with your thoughts on this one, please.
Thank you, Guy. I think that there is no single answer to this question. It really depends on the private 5G use case and the industry we're working in. Of course, the different industries and different needs have very different operating conditions. So if you take an example, when we work with the security forces, or we work in extraction industries like oil and gas, mining, typically we're talking about platforms that need to be deployed in fairly harsh conditions. In the case of the security forces, also with a need to be able to take the equipment on the go and deploy very quickly. So that requires some specialized ruggedized infrastructure like the HP Edgeline series. Then if you go into different industries like manufacturing, healthcare, agriculture, obviously the needs are in terms of the operating conditions are much more regulated. We don't have those same need for ruggedized equipment, but we may have constraints in terms of form factor, space that's available, power consumption, things like that. And here typically we tend to look at either a DL110, which is a little bit smaller, less power consuming, which is also a very strong option for the virtualized RAN we talked about before, or even just a standard rack mount server, which in many cases is actually very welcome for these private 5G deployments.
Thank you, Richard. Martin, let's go straight across to you for some thoughts on which is if there is indeed a best edge platform for purpose-built private 5G.
Well, of course, as Richard has said, it depends. But what I would say is what we're seeing is that in most cases, private 5G is driven by the needs of specific applications. And those applications are often some sort of IoT or some video analytics or, but they're essentially applications that are well supported by hyperscale clouds. But what you often need is, depending on the use case, is some local processing and local connectivity to provide connection between those applications at the customer premises and the devices that are feeding into them. Now, for ease of deployment, what you really want is a logical extension of the hyperscale cloud. And the way we do this is with a product called Azure Stack Edge. It's hardware as a service, so it's a box that resides on the customer premises. It has all of the ease of deployment and management of hyperscale cloud, but with locality of applications, and also, of course, the key 5G components that you need, the packet core, and in future the vRAN components will run on there as well. So one box that supports the application, the private 5G connectivity, the backhaul to the cloud, with overall ease of management and orchestration from the cloud. That fits the bill for a very large number of the use cases we're seeing for private 5G.
Okay, thanks, Martin. So it depends on the use case, although we can collate a few of these use cases together to come up with a solution that is going to cover quite a few of those. Is that what our other guests are thinking here? There is no one best option for a purpose-built private 5G network platform. It's very much dependent upon what the specific use is. Yes, Arnaud.
Indeed, because we need to let our business customer some flexibility. So if they already have chosen a cloud platform for their sites, it's important that the 5G connectivity we are adding to this site are compatible with that. So that's why we have a multi-cloud strategy as Orange, especially Orange Business Services, where we can really integrate on demand the 5G to the existing cloud infrastructure. At the same time, we are offering some more package solution for the customer, not to bother of this integration. And of course, we have our own Orange infrastructure as well we can propose for that.
Okay, thanks everybody. Now, security is always an issue, and rightly so. How does private 5G security differ from public network 5G security? Richard.
Yeah, thank you. I think there's two aspects to it. First, on the 5G itself, if we look at the full solution, I take the example of the security forces. It's clear there are some demands that we do not encounter when we go into public 5G, even at the infrastructure level. What we're seeing is things like, I want to be absolutely certain that my full solution is tamper-proof. Nobody can, from the outside, can touch it. And so we see that there's a demand for things like silicon root of trust at the infrastructure level, in addition to all the elements that we're taking on the 5G side itself. Then the other aspect that we see is the way we look at security. We need to think a little bit different. We need to think from an enterprise perspective about security. And here we learn a lot from the discussions and the work that we're doing with our colleagues on the Wi-Fi side, on HPE Aruba, because in the enterprise, the trust domain is starting from the existing IT infrastructure. And we need to find a way to extend that by providing the 5G connectivity as an integral part of that existing trust domain. While from a public 5G perspective, we tend to look at Wi-Fi as being untrusted and the 5G network being trusted. Here we have an opposite perspective where the enterprise is looking at their existing Wi-Fi infrastructure as that's working, I control it, I have my security policies. How do I extend that to the 5G space? So in that sense, there is definitely a difference also on the 5G side on the security when we try to combine those two elements.
Well, let's move on. Can I ask about the drivers? Are there any enterprise apps that are driving telco edge usage? Martin, let me start by asking you.
Sure. So we see, as I said earlier, generally speaking, private 5G is driven by the needs of some specific application. It's not always the case. We see cases, for example, at airports where the fundamental requirement is just very fast connectivity across a wide area, for example, for downloading telemetry of an aeroplane. But more often, it's something like a safety compliance requirement where you use video analytics, on a large site, a mining site, for example, to make sure that people aren't where they shouldn't be. Or it might be a situation where you're trying to monitor footfall, for example, in a shopping mall, and again you're using video analytics as a way of seeing where people are and how people are moving. So often what we find is it starts with the application, and the application, let's say, is video analytics, and then it's a case of we've got to then connect video cameras to the application with high security, with low latency, with good throughput, and so on. And sometimes wired Ethernet works, sometimes Wi-Fi works, but occasionally you have a situation, typically because of the extent of a physical site, where 5G is the best fit. So 5G comes in on the back of a particular application rather than people saying, "Oh, I want to roll out a 5G network now. Let's figure out what I can do with it."
Yeah, thanks, Martin. As you say, it's an application that drives that demand. Aaron, let's come across to you for some thoughts about if there are any enterprise apps that are actually driving edge usage now.
Yes, a lot of enterprise applications are driving at the end the telco edge usage, depending on the vertical and the smart solutions. We are currently incubating 3 types of smart solutions as part of our incubation activities in smart building, smart office, and smart manufacturing. That, by the way, don't require always 5G. So it's not always with private 5G, but with few of them with private 5G. In the manufacturing sector, there are applications like visual inspection, which need telco edge for reducing the inspection cost on site. We have also the telemetry-based applications that will need, again, the telco edge capabilities to secure communication at scale and allowing a rapid deployment. And last example, there are more and more robots, AGVs, in factories, in warehouses, in port, airport, and even in offices. So in our side, we are piloting with a robot inside an office. This automated guided vehicle, of course, require edge capabilities for controlling them, changing tasks in real time. And just to illustrate, the AGV should arrive in front of a machine in a factory at the right time, not before, not after. So this determinism needs a very low latency control, and so 5G and edge.
Excellent. Thank you, Aaron, for those examples there. Richard, let's go back over to you for thoughts about enterprise apps that are driving usage.
Yeah, thank you. I think the examples that both Aaron and Martin mentioned, I definitely recognize them. I think at this point, what we see is the majority of the use cases are, first of all, there's an application. That application has a need, can be because of coverage, can be because of reliability, can be for different reasons. And the existing connectivity options do not provide for that need. And at that point, the private 5G becomes a relevant option. So at this point, I still think we're in a stage where people have already kind of designed their solutions, and then they find relatively late in the stage that they have a gap on the connectivity and they look for a suitable option. What I do believe is that over time, people will start realizing the extent of what private networking is allowing them in terms of coverage, in terms of bandwidth, in terms of reliability, and will start looking for different use cases, different capabilities to build on top of that once they realize the potential of the technology. But that will take time. It will require some initial use cases to have this deployed, and then people will start looking for something like digital twin, for instance. We're doing digital twin work with a customer that is starting to get, changing the process, changing the way they work, because they realize they have that capability now. And if they start exploiting that fully, they can actually change the way they work. But that, I think, is a second stage, and it's quite typical in the adoption of new technology. First, you do faster, better, cheaper, whatever the existing capabilities, and then you start thinking about, oh, actually, now that I have that, I can do also this, and this on top of that. We're not there yet, for the most part.
No, thank you, Richard. And as you say, it's always interesting, isn't it, that you require a few good use cases to start with, and they then generate and lead to ideas that generate further additional use cases. Arnaud, let me come across to you for comments on this question.
Yes, just to complement to what has already been said on this subject, we have opened a number of 5G labs to really test in advance and have new application on 5G, and especially on the B2B domain, where we see more and more how to leverage real-time capabilities that is giving this new connectivity. So it can be for a technician to have help with augmented reality application. But there are many other use cases now that you have test and deploy for some cases with customs. So there we can answer that through, let's say, on the public network already differentiating some quality of services. Of course, on the private network, that is the topic there. But I do think that a new model is coming where we can leverage the public network just to exit the right traffic on a business site, and what we call the hybrid approach, where with 5GSA you have this possibility to industrialize this exit, and that will help really generating new real-time usage in each sector, in fact.
Great, thank you very much for that, Arnaud, and thank you everyone for your responses to that question. I have one more question I'd like to ask, and that is, if we can turn away from the enterprise and look at the consumer market, because we are so focused on the enterprise in our coverage as a driver for and use case for the edge. But if we can look at the consumer market for a moment, and if I can borrow a very overused phrase that we've been hearing since the 1990s, I'd like to ask, is cloud gaming perhaps the killer app? And I hate to say the killer app, but is cloud gaming the killer app for 5G Edge when it comes to consumer markets? There's got to be something in consumer markets that's driving edge usage. Any thoughts about what might be the main driver for edge from our consumers? Arnaud, perhaps I could come across to you for thoughts on the consumer market first.
Yes, it's true that we talk a lot on 5G B2B, but in fact we have a massive transformation, I think, on the consumer side, because there is a great momentum around immersive experience, and we see a number of initiatives on that. And when you look to the XR domain, so really this capability to have a better connectivity for this XR, and it even now on 3GPP the standardization body an item there that is open to have a better 5G for XR. I think there we will have new objects with some helmet, of course, but with new objects that will arrive around the smartphone for this. And it's moving quite fast and with quite big actors with quite investment. So I'm sure, by the way, if you can on Orange booth on the Mobile World Congress, you will see that. So we have the immersive domain, perhaps it's even more, but just the cloud gaming segment, that is one use of it.
Thanks, Arnaud. Well, we'll make sure to send Ray and Yanni across to the Orange booth to see that in action. Martin, I'm sure at some stage we'll all be moving lock, stock and barrel to the metaverse and exploiting virtual reality and XR. But what's your thoughts on Edge and the consumer market?
Yeah, I mean, I think cloud gaming and thinking sort of slightly bigger and longer term, the whole metaverse thing, extended reality thing, it's certainly tempting to view that as the killer app for public MEC and telco edge. One of the concerns, though, and 3GPP has just done a study on this, is capacity of the 5G network. I mean, if you're going to stream a high-resolution stereo, image stream to a head-mounted display in support of any sort of mixed reality application, you're looking at an order of 25 to 30 megabits per user. And, when you look at the aggregate capacity of a 5G cell, that is not going to support a very large number of users. And in fact, the 3GPP study, talks about, order of 10 users per cell. Well, that's not going to make that's not a very appetizing proposition, if you like. So I'm not sure how this is going to pan out. I mean, it feels from a sort of pure technology standpoint that we need a better way of splitting the processing tasks between the device that the consumer carries around and the edge cloud in order to reduce the amount of bandwidth that we need to consume. Otherwise there's some sort of laws of physics issues that we just can't get around.
All right, thanks, Martin. Indeed, and then this is certainly a topic that we do need to explore in way more detail later. Well, unless there are any other comments about the consumer edge, then I'd just like to thank all our guests for taking part today. Thank you very much indeed for sharing your views with us on the programme. Now, if you're watching this on day 3 of our Spotlight on 5G series, then please do stay with us and take a look at the rest of our programmes on 5G Edge and private networks. On Monday, we looked at the 5G core. Yesterday, it was the turn of the RAN, and tomorrow we'll focus on 5G cloud. Plus, we have lots more related content, including the latest news from MWC in the Daily Slice programme, when I'll be joined from Barcelona by my colleague Ray Lemaitre. And next week we'll see the return of the After Show, our live Q&A programmes. So don't forget to send us your questions on Edge and private networks. There's a Q&A form right here on the website. A final reminder to tune in to The Slice for the very latest news from MWC in Barcelona. For now though, thank you for watching and goodbye.